The pink dress hung in my closet like a question mark. I'd bought it 3 weeks ago at Macy's. Not the clearance rack, mind you, but full price. $68 that could have gone toward groceries or the electric bill. But something in me had rebelled against practicality that day. Something that whispered you deserve to look nice for once. I ran my fingers over the soft fabric, feeling the subtle texture of the weave. It was modest but elegant, with 3/4 sleeves and a hemline that fell just below my knees. The kind of dress a woman of 62 should wear to her granddaughter's college graduation. The kind of dress that said, "I'm proud to be here." Karen was graduating summa cum laude from State University with a degree in engineering. My granddaughter. The girl who used to sit at my kitchen table doing homework while I folded laundry, who called me every Sunday without fail, who still sent me handwritten thank you notes for birthday cards. The girl who had never, not once, made me feel like a burden. I slipped the dress over my head and adjusted the sleeves. In the mirror, I saw a woman who had worked hard her entire life, cleaning houses, taking care of other people's children, scrimping and saving so that her own children could have better. The face looking back at me was lined but not defeated, tired but not broken. Not yet. The doorbell rang at exactly 10 o'clock. Joyce, my daughter, was nothing if not punctual. I grabbed my purse and the small wrapped gift I'd bought for Karen, a silver bracelet with a charm that said, "Dreams come true," in elegant script. Another splurge. Another small rebellion against the voice that usually whispered you can't afford it. "Mom, you ready?" Joyce called from the living room. I could hear the impatience in her voice already, the subtle edge that suggested I was somehow already behind schedule despite being exactly on time. I walked out to meet her, smoothing the dress one more time. She was checking her phone, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the morning light that streamed through my small front window. Her outfit probably cost more than I spent on clothes in 6 months, a tailored suit in cream with matching shoes and handbag. She looked up when I entered and I saw her face change. "Oh," the word came out flat, disappointed. "That's what you're wearing?" I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "What's wrong with it?" Joyce's eyes traveled up and down my body, and I watched her expression shift from surprise to something harder to define. Embarrassment? Shame? "It's just, Mom, you look poorer than you are. This is Karen's big day. There are going to be pictures." The words hit me like a physical blow. "You look poorer than you are." As if poverty were something shameful, something to be hidden. As if the 40 years I'd spent cleaning other people's homes, the sacrifices I'd made, the dignity I'd maintained through every hardship, could be erased by a dress that wasn't expensive enough for her standards. "I look fine," I said quietly, but my voice wavered. "Mom." Joyce's tone was the same one she'd used when Karen was small and had done something wrong. Patient but firm, as if she were dealing with a child who didn't understand the rules of the adult world. "This is important. There are going to be people there. Important people. Karen's professors, her friends' families. I don't want—" She trailed off, but I heard what she didn't say. "I don't want to be embarrassed by you." The silence stretched between us, heavy with 37 years of accumulated hurt. All those times she'd corrected my grammar in front of her friends. All those family gatherings where I'd been seated at the children's table. All those moments when I'd felt like an inconvenience rather than a mother. "Fine," I said finally. "Where should I sit?" Something flickered in Joyce's eyes. Relief, maybe, or surprise that I'd given in so easily. "Just, maybe toward the back? The front rows are really for immediate family and VIPs. Immediate family." The words burned. I was Karen's grandmother, the woman who had helped raise her when Joyce was working 60-hour weeks trying to establish her career. I was the one who had driven Karen to piano lessons and soccer practice, who had helped her with her science fair projects, who had been there for every scraped knee and broken heart. But I wasn't immediate family. I was just, what? A relic? An embarrassment? "I understand," I said, though I didn't. I couldn't. We rode to the university in silence. I sat in the passenger seat of Joyce's pristine BMW, watching the familiar streets of my neighborhood give way to the manicured lawns and modern buildings of the campus. My hands worried the strap of my purse, and I found myself thinking about all the times I'd driven this same route in my beat-up Honda, bringing Karen to visit the university when she was still in high school, watching her eyes light up as she talked about her dreams of becoming an engineer. The graduation ceremony was being held in the main auditorium, a grand space with soaring ceilings and rows upon rows of seats. Families streamed in, dressed in their finest clothes, carrying bouquets of flowers and cameras. I watched Joyce scan the crowd, her eyes settling on a group of well-dressed couples near the front. Her people, her husband's colleagues and their wives, the other parents from Karen's exclusive private school, the network of connections that had helped smooth Karen's path to this day. "There they are," Joyce said, waving to the group. "Mom, you'll be fine back there, right? You'll have a better view of the stage." It was a lie, and we both knew it. The back rows were for overflow, for people who arrived late or didn't have reserved seats. But I nodded anyway, watching as Joyce walked toward the front of the auditorium, her heels clicking confidently on the polished floor. She was greeted with air kisses and enthusiastic hugs, immediately absorbed into the circle of privilege and success. I found a seat in the back, wedged between an elderly man who smelled like cigars and a young woman who was live-streaming the ceremony on her phone. The stage seemed miles away, and I had to squint to make out the faces of the graduates as they filed in. But I could see Karen, fourth row from the front, her cap slightly askew and her face glowing with excitement. The ceremony began with the usual pomp and pageantry. The dean spoke about achievement and potential, about the graduates' bright futures and the proud families who had supported them. I thought about the night shifts I'd worked to help pay for Karen's textbooks, the Christmas presents I'd skipped to contribute to her college fund, the meals I'd eaten alone so she could have dinner with her friends. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for, the presentation of graduates with highest honors. Karen's name was called Karen Rose Finney, summa cum laude, Bachelor of Science in Engineering. The crowd applauded politely, and I felt tears prick my eyes. My granddaughter, the first person in our family to graduate from college, walking across that stage with her head held high. But then something unexpected happened. As Karen reached the podium to receive her diploma, she stopped. She looked out at the audience, her eyes scanning the faces until they found mine in the back row. And then, to my absolute shock, she began to cry. Not the happy tears of accomplishment, but deep, wrenching sobs that echoed through the auditorium. The dean looked confused. The other graduates shifted uncomfortably, and a murmur ran through the crowd. Karen gripped the podium with both hands and spoke directly into the microphone, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm sorry," she said, her words carrying clearly through the sound system. I need to say something. My grandma is here today. She's sitting in the back row because..." Her voice broke, and she took a shaky breath. "Because my mom told her she looked too poor to sit with the family." The auditorium fell silent. I felt every eye turn toward me, felt the weight of hundreds of gazes settling on my pink dress and my carefully styled gray hair. My cheeks burned with humiliation and something else, a fierce, protective anger that someone had hurt my granddaughter on her special day. "My grandma cleaned houses so I could be here," Karen continued, her voice growing stronger. "She worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, to help pay for my education. She never complained, never asked for anything in return. She just loved me, and she deserves to be honored today, not hidden away like she's something to be ashamed of." The silence stretched on, and then something remarkable happened. One person started clapping, a professor in the front row, his face stern with disapproval as he looked toward where Joyce was sitting. Then another person joined in, and another, until the entire auditorium was on its feet, applauding not for Karen's academic achievement, but for me. I sat frozen in my seat, overwhelmed by the sudden reversal of fortune. 5 minutes ago, I had been the embarrassment, the problem to be managed. Now I was being celebrated, lifted up in front of all these people who had just learned my story. The old man next to me patted my arm gently, and the young woman with the phone had tears in her eyes. "Mrs. Finney?" The dean's voice crackled through the speakers. "Would you please join your granddaughter on stage?" Every instinct told me to shrink back, to decline politely, to not make a scene. But something else was rising in me. A lifetime of swallowed pride, of accepted slights, of being made to feel less than. I stood up slowly, my legs shaking, and began the long walk down the aisle toward the stage. The applause continued as I made my way forward, and I could see Joyce's face in the crowd, white with shock and mortification. Her carefully constructed image was crumbling in real time, and for the first time in decades, I didn't care about her feelings more than my own. As I climbed the steps to the stage, I felt something shifting inside me, some fundamental change in how I saw myself and my place in the world. I was no longer the woman who sat in the back row, who accepted being hidden away, who apologized for taking up space. I was Karen Finney, and I had something to say. The microphone felt cold against my trembling fingers as I stood at the podium, looking out at an ocean of faces. 2,000 people, maybe more, all waiting to hear what the cleaning lady had to say. Behind me, I could feel Karen's presence, her hand resting gently on my shoulder, giving me strength I didn't know I possessed. My eyes found Joyce in the crowd. She was sitting rigidly in her seat, her face a mask of controlled panic. Her husband Willie sat beside her, his jaw clenched tight, probably calculating how much damage this would do to his reputation at the law firm. The other couples in their row, the Peloses, the Waters, the Deloras, were whispering among themselves, their perfectly made-up faces twisted with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. I cleared my throat and the sound echoed through the auditorium. The applause had died down, but I could still feel the warmth of it, the unexpected gift of being seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. I began, then stopped. My voice sounded strange, amplified through the speakers, smaller than I'd expected, but somehow more present. I'm not used to speaking in public. A few people in the audience chuckled sympathetically, and I felt some of the tension leave my shoulders. These weren't enemies. They were parents and grandparents, aunts and uncles, people who understood love and sacrifice, and the complicated dynamics of family. 62 years ago, I continued, finding my rhythm, I was born in a house not 20 miles from here. My parents were farmers, good people who worked hard and taught me that dignity comes from honest work, not from how much money you have in the bank. I paused, letting that sink in. In the front row, I could see Joyce shifting uncomfortably in her seat. When I was 18, I married my high school sweetheart. We had dreams, big dreams. We were going to change the world. My voice caught slightly. Frank died in Vietnam when our daughter was only 3 years old. Suddenly, I was a single mother with no college degree, no family money, and a little girl who needed everything I could give her. The auditorium was completely silent now. Even the graduates who had been fidgeting in their seats were listening intently. So I did what I had to do. I cleaned houses, I worked in diners, I took care of other people's children while my own daughter was at school. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest work. It paid the bills and put food on the table. More importantly, it taught me something about the world that I think some people never learn. I looked directly at Joyce, and she flinched as if I'd struck her. It taught me that every person has value, regardless of their job title or their bank account. The woman who cleans your office works just as hard as the man who sits behind the desk. The single mother juggling 3 jobs to keep her family afloat has just as much dignity as the CEO who inherited his position. We all deserve respect. We all deserve to be treated with kindness. The applause started again, scattered at first, but growing stronger. I held up my hand, and it quieted. I raised my daughter to believe those things too. I thought I'd succeeded. She went to college, the first in our family to do so. She married a successful man, moved to a beautiful house in the suburbs, had a daughter of her own. I was so proud of her. I thought I'd given her everything she needed to be happy. My voice hardened slightly, and I saw Joyce's face pale. But somewhere along the way, she learned different lessons. She learned that appearances matter more than substance. She learned that money can buy you the right to look down on others. She learned that being embarrassed by your family is a small price to pay for social acceptance. A murmur ran through the crowd. People were turning to look at Joyce, and I could see her shrinking in her seat, trying to make herself invisible. Today, my daughter told me I looked too poor to sit with the family. She asked me to hide in the back row so I wouldn't embarrass her in front of her friends. And do you know what the saddest part is? I almost did it. I almost let her shame me into silence. The words were coming faster now, 40 years of suppressed hurt and anger pouring out like water from a broken dam. I spent my whole life putting my daughter's needs before my own. I worked extra shifts so she could have piano lessons. I went without new clothes so she could have the right school supplies. I ate peanut butter sandwiches for dinner so she could have meat on her plate. I never asked for gratitude, never demanded recognition. I just loved her, unconditionally, the way parents do. I could see people in the audience nodding, tears in their eyes. These were my people, the ones who understood sacrifice, who had made their own quiet compromises for the sake of their children. But love isn't supposed to be a one-way street. Respect isn't something you stop giving once you've made it in the world. And family isn't something you hide away when it becomes inconvenient. The applause was building again, but I wasn't finished. I had one more thing to say, the thing that had been burning in my chest for years. My granddaughter? I turned to smile at Karen, who was crying openly now. My granddaughter called me up here today because she understands something her mother has forgotten. She understands that the hands that cleaned houses are the same hands that helped her with her homework. That the woman who wasn't good enough to sit in the front row is the same woman who drove her to every soccer game, every piano recital, every school play. I faced the audience again, my voice strong and clear. She understands that love is not about what you can afford to give. It's about what you choose to give. And sometimes, what you choose to give is everything. The standing ovation was instantaneous and thunderous. People were on their feet, applauding not just for my words but for the truth they recognized in them. I looked out at the sea of faces, professors and students, parents and grandparents, people from all walks of life, and felt something I hadn't experienced in years: belonging. Through the noise, I heard Karen's voice in my ear. I love you, Grandma. I'm so proud of you. But my eyes were on Joyce. She was still seated, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking. For a moment, I felt the old familiar tug of maternal concern, the instinct to comfort her, to make everything better. But then I remembered the coldness in her voice that morning, the way she'd looked at me like I was something distasteful she had to manage. The applause began to die down, and the dean stepped back to the podium. "Thank you, Mrs. Finney," he said, his voice warm with genuine admiration. That was beautiful." I nodded and started to step away from the microphone, but something made me turn back. The words came out before I could stop them, quiet but clear enough for everyone to hear. "Joyce, I want you to know that I forgive you for being embarrassed by me, but I will never again apologize for who I am or where I come from. And I will never again hide in the back row of my own granddaughter's life." The silence that followed was different from before, heavier, more charged. It was the silence of a line being drawn, a boundary being set. I had just told my daughter, in front of 2,000 people, that the old rules no longer applied. I walked back to my seat, not in the back row where I'd been relegated, but in the front row, where the dean himself had gestured for me to sit. As I passed Joyce's row, I caught her eye for just a moment. She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, fear mixed with something that might have been respect. The ceremony continued, but I barely heard it. I was thinking about what came next, about the conversation that would have to happen between Joyce and me, about the relationship that had just been fundamentally altered. I was thinking about Karen, about how proud I was of her courage, about how I wanted to be worthy of the love she'd shown me. Most of all, I was thinking about myself, about the woman I'd been that morning, willing to hide in the back row, and the woman I was now, sitting in the front row with my head held high. The transformation felt fragile, like something that could be lost if I wasn't careful to protect it. But as I looked around at the faces of the people who had stood and applauded for me, who had recognized my story as their own, I realized I wasn't alone anymore. I had allies now, witnesses to my worth, and that changed everything. The ceremony ended with the traditional throwing of caps, and I watched as Karen tossed hers high into the air, her face radiant with joy. She found me in the crowd afterwards, pushing through the throng of congratulatory families to wrap me in a fierce hug. "Thank you," she whispered in my ear. "Thank you for standing up for yourself, for standing up for us." Over her shoulder, I saw Joyce approaching, her face pale but determined. Willie was beside her, his expression unreadable. The moment of reckoning had arrived, and I felt my spine straighten, my shoulders square. I was ready for whatever came next. "Mom," Joyce's voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the tremor underneath. "We need to talk." I looked at her over Karen's shoulder, noting the way her hands were clenched at her sides, the careful blankness of her expression. This was Joyce in damage control mode, the same face she wore when dealing with difficult clients at her marketing firm. Professional, detached, strategic. "Yes," I said simply. "We do." Karen pulled back from our embrace, glancing between her mother and me with concern. "Maybe we should—" "No, sweetheart," I interrupted gently, placing my hand on her cheek. "This is between your mother and me. You go celebrate with your friends. You've earned it." Karen hesitated, clearly torn between her desire to protect me and her recognition that this conversation was inevitable. Finally, she squeezed my hand and whispered, "I'll be right over there if you need me," before reluctantly joining a group of her classmates who were posing for pictures. Willie hung back, checking his phone with studied casualness. But I could feel his awareness of every word, every gesture. This would make excellent gossip at the country club, the day his mother-in-law publicly humiliated his wife. I almost smiled at the thought. "Not here," Joyce said, glancing around at the dispersing crowd. Several people were still looking in our direction, their expressions ranging from curious to sympathetic. "Let's go to the car." "No." The word came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't soften it. "Here's fine. In public. Where people can see." Joyce's eyes flashed with anger, and for a moment I saw a glimpse of the real emotion beneath her composed facade. "You just humiliated me in front of everyone. In front of Willie's colleagues, my friends, Karen's classmates. Do you have any idea what you've done?" I told the truth. I kept my voice level, calm. "I'm sorry if the truth embarrasses you, but that's not my problem anymore." "Your problem?" Joyce's voice rose slightly before she caught herself and glanced around nervously. "Mom, I've been taking care of you for years, making sure you have everything you need, checking on you, including you in family events. And this is how you repay me? By making me look like a monster in front of half the city?" The audacity of it took my breath away. Taking care of me? Including me in family events. As long as I sat quietly in the corner and didn't draw attention to myself. As long as I was grateful and undemanding and invisible. "Taking care of me?" I repeated slowly. "Is that what you call it?" "Yes." Joyce's composure was starting to crack. "The house you live in. Who do you think co-signed that mortgage when your credit wasn't good enough? Who do you think pays for your car insurance? Who makes sure you have health coverage?" Each word was delivered like a blow, designed to remind me of my dependence, my place in the hierarchy of our relationship. The old Karen would have absorbed those words, felt the familiar weight of obligation and guilt settling on her shoulders. But something had changed in the last hour, something fundamental and irreversible. "You're right," I said quietly. "You've helped me financially, and I've been grateful for that help. But gratitude doesn't mean I have to accept being treated like a burden. It doesn't mean I have to hide who I am to make you comfortable." "I never asked you to hide who you are," Joyce protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "You asked me to sit in the back row because I looked too poor to be associated with your family. You told me not to embarrass you. What would you call that?" Joyce's mouth opened and closed, and I could see her struggling to find a justification that would make sense even to herself. It's a competitive world, Mom. Appearances matter. Willie's position at the firm, my business. We have to be careful about our image. And I damaged that image. That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said. This morning, and 100 times before this morning. Every time you've corrected my grammar in front of your friends. Every time you've steered conversations away from my work. Every time you've introduced me as just your mother. as if I'm some sort of minor footnote in your success story. I could see people watching us now, drawn by the intensity of our conversation, even though we were keeping our voices relatively low. Good. Let them watch. Let them see that I wasn't backing down anymore. You're being dramatic, Joyce said, but her voice was weaker now. I've always been proud of you. You've been proud of my sacrifice, I interrupted. You've been proud of what I gave up for you, but you've never been proud of who I am. The truth hung between us like a blade. I could see it hit home by the way Joyce's face went pale, by the way her carefully constructed arguments seemed to crumble. That's not, she started, then stopped. For a moment, I thought she might actually be capable of honesty, of admitting what we both knew was true. But then her jaw tightened, and I saw her retreat back into defensiveness. You don't understand the pressure I'm under, she said. The world I live in. It's not like when you were raising me. Everything is more complicated now, more competitive. I have to— You have to what? Pretend your mother doesn't exist? Pretend you came from somewhere else? Someone else? I don't pretend that. Don't you? When was the last time you brought Willie's colleagues to my house? When was the last time you mentioned to your book club friends that your mother cleans houses? When was the last time you talked about your father, about how he died serving his country, about the struggles we faced after that? Each question was a small wound, and I could see them accumulating, see the way Joyce's composure was starting to fracture. Part of me, the part that had spent 37 years protecting her feelings, wanted to stop, wanted to comfort her, but a stronger part, the part that had been born today on that stage, refused to retreat. You want to know what I understand? I continued. I understand that you're ashamed of where you came from. I understand that you think success means erasing your past, climbing high enough that you don't have to look down at the rest of us anymore. And I understand that you raised your daughter to believe the opposite of everything you were taught. Karen loves you, Joyce began. Yes, she does. Despite your best efforts to teach her that love has conditions, that family is something you graduate from when you find better options. That's not fair. Isn't it? When was the last time you called me just to talk? When was the last time you asked about my life, my feelings, my dreams? When was the last time you treated me like a person instead of an obligation? The silence stretched between us, and I could see Joyce struggling with the weight of questions she couldn't answer. Around us, the crowd was thinning as families headed off to celebrate, but a small group had gathered at a discreet distance, clearly invested in the drama unfolding before them. I don't know what you want from me, Joyce said finally, and for the first time she sounded genuinely lost. I want you to see me, I said simply, not as an embarrassment to be managed or a burden to be carried, but as your mother, as the woman who loves you unconditionally, even when you make it very hard to do so. I do see you. No, you don't. You see a problem to be solved. You see someone who might reflect poorly on the image you've worked so hard to create. You see everything except the person who raised you, who sacrificed for you, who would do it all again without question if that's what you needed. I took a step closer to her, and she instinctively stepped back. But here's what's changed today, Joyce. I'm done being invisible. I'm done apologizing for who I am. I'm done sitting in the back row of my own life to make you comfortable. So what are you saying? There was something dangerous in her voice now, a threat barely contained. You're cutting me off. You're going to punish me for not being the perfect daughter? The question revealed everything. Her assumption that this was about punishment, about power plays and emotional manipulation. It revealed how little she understood about love, about dignity, about the difference between consequences and cruelty. I'm saying that our relationship is going to change, I said calmly. I'm saying that if you want me in your life, you need to decide whether you can love me as I am, not as you wish I were. And if I can't? The question hung in the air between us, stark and brutal in its honesty. For the first time in our conversation, Joyce had said exactly what she meant, revealed the calculation that had always been at the heart of our relationship. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not my daughter, but a stranger. A beautiful, successful, cold stranger who shared my DNA but none of my values. The realization should have broken my heart, but instead, it filled me with a strange sense of peace. "Then I guess we'll both know where we stand," I said. I turned to go, but her voice stopped me. "Mom, wait, I need to think about this. About what you've said. Can we talk tomorrow? After I've had time to process everything?" I turned back to her, studying her face. There was something different in her expression now. Not quite vulnerability, but a crack in the armor. A recognition that the old rules of our relationship had been permanently altered. "Of course," I said. "But understand something, Joyce. Tomorrow's conversation isn't going to be about me apologizing for what happened today. It's not going to be about finding a way back to the way things were. That woman, the one who hid in the back row, who accepted being treated as less than, she's gone." I saw her flinch, saw the reality of the situation finally penetrating her defenses. "The question you need to ask yourself is whether you can accept the woman who's replaced her." I walked away then, leaving her standing in the shadow of the auditorium, finally alone with the consequences of her choices. The next morning came with the kind of clarity that only follows a storm. I woke before dawn, as I had every day for the past 40 years, my body programmed for early shifts and other people's schedules. But for the first time in recent memory, I had nowhere to be, nothing urgent demanding my attention. Mrs. Alexis Lowy had given me the week off from cleaning her house, a graduation gift she'd called it, though I suspected she'd heard about yesterday's events through the intricate network of gossip that connected the wealthy families in town. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, watching the sunrise paint my small backyard in shades of gold and amber. The silence felt different somehow. Not empty, but full of possibility. Yesterday had changed something fundamental in me, shifted the very ground I stood on, and I was still discovering what that meant. The phone rang at 7:30. Joyce's number appeared on the caller ID, and I let it ring 4 times before answering. "Hello, Joyce? Mom?" Her voice was strained, exhausted. "I didn't sleep much last night. I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you? Sorry, I mean?" The question caught me off guard. The old Karen would have rushed to reassure her, to smooth over the discomfort, to make everything better. But I found myself considering her words carefully, examining my own feelings with the same attention I'd once reserved for stubborn stains on expensive carpets. "I'm sorry you're hurting," I said finally. "I'm not sorry I told the truth." A long pause. "I've been thinking about what you said, about seeing you, about the way I've treated you. And I think maybe you're right. About some things." It was a small concession, grudging and incomplete, but it was more than I'd expected. "Which things?" I have been embarrassed. Not of you, exactly, but of," she struggled with the words, "of what people might think. Of how it might look. How what might look. Having a mother who cleans houses. Having a mother who didn't go to college, who doesn't fit into the world I've built for myself." The honesty was painful, but it was honest. I could hear the cost of the admission in her voice, the way it scraped against her throat like broken glass. "Thank you for saying that," I said quietly. "I don't know how to fix this, Mom. I don't know how to be different than I am. I'm not asking you to be different. I'm asking you to decide whether you can love me as I am, not as you wish I were. I do love you. Do you? Or do you love the idea of me, the woman who sacrificed everything for you, who never asked for anything in return, who disappeared into the background whenever it was convenient?" Another long pause. I could hear her breathing, could almost feel her struggling with concepts that had never occurred to her before. "I don't know," she said finally. "I honestly don't know." The admission hung between us like a bridge, not to reconciliation, but to a new kind of honesty. For the first time in our relationship, Joyce was admitting uncertainty, vulnerability, the possibility that she might be wrong about something fundamental. "That's okay," I said. "Not knowing is better than pretending." "Is it? Because right now, not knowing feels terrible." I almost smiled. Most growth feels terrible at first. Willie thinks I should apologize and ask you to just let things go back to normal. He says family is family and we should just put this behind us. What do you think? I think normal wasn't working for you, and maybe it wasn't working for me either. The words surprised me. I'd been so focused on my own hurt, my own needs, that I hadn't considered the possibility that Joyce might be unhappy with the dynamic we'd created. What do you mean? I mean that constantly managing your feelings, constantly worrying about how you'll react to things, constantly trying to balance what you need with what I think I need. It's exhausting. And it's not fair to either of us. I felt something shift in my chest, a door opening that I hadn't even realized was closed. You're right. It's not fair. So what do we do now? The question that had been haunting me since yesterday. What did we do now? How did we rebuild a relationship that had been built on fundamentally flawed assumptions? How did we start over with 37 years of accumulated hurt and resentment between us? I don't know, I admitted, but I know what we don't do. We don't go back to the way things were. Okay, so what would different look like? I thought about it, really thought about it. Different would look like honesty. Real honesty, not the kind where we pretend everything is fine when it's not. Different would look like respect, both ways. Different would look like you not being ashamed of who I am, and me not accepting being treated as less than. That sounds hard. It is hard, but it's also necessary. At least, it is for me. And if I can't do it, if I can't be the daughter you need me to be, the question I'd been dreading, the one that cut to the heart of everything, then I guess we'll have to accept that we love each other from a distance, that sometimes love isn't enough if it doesn't come with respect. I could hear her crying then, soft, muffled sobs that she was trying to hide. The sound triggered every maternal instinct I possessed, but I forced myself to stay still, to not rush to comfort her. This was her grief to feel, her reckoning to face. I don't want to lose you, she whispered. You haven't lost me, but you can't keep me on your terms anymore. Those days are over. I know, and I'm scared. Of what? Of not being good enough. Of not being able to change enough. Of losing you anyway, even if I try. For the first time since yesterday, I felt my heart soften toward her. Not the old, enabling softness that had allowed me to be mistreated, but something else. Compassion for the woman who had been raised to believe that love was conditional, that acceptance had to be earned, that vulnerability was weakness. Joyce, I said gently, I need you to understand something. I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm not asking you to transform overnight. I'm asking you to try, to see me, to treat me with the same respect you'd give to any other person in your life. What if I mess up? What if I fall back into old patterns? Then we'll deal with it when it happens, but we'll deal with it honestly, not by pretending it didn't happen or that it doesn't matter. I want to try, she said, and I could hear the fear in her voice, the uncertainty. I want to try, but I don't know how. Neither do I admitted. But maybe that's okay. Maybe figuring it out together is better than pretending we already know. Can you give me some time to think about this? To figure out how to be different? How much time? I don't know. A few weeks? A month? I considered it. A month ago, I would have said yes immediately, grateful for any crumb of attention or consideration. But now I found myself weighing the request against my own needs, my own timeline. A month, I said finally, but with conditions. What conditions? No contact during that month unless you're ready to have a real conversation. No dropping by with groceries as an excuse to check on me. No sending Willie to feel out my mood. No using Karen as a go-between. If you need time to think, then really think. Don't just wait for me to get tired of standing my ground. That's fair. And understand that when that month is over, things will be different regardless of what you decide. I won't be the same person I was before yesterday. I won't go back to accepting crumbs and calling it love. I understand. Do you? Because I need you to really understand this, Joyce. I need you to understand that I'm not bluffing. I'm not playing games or trying to manipulate you. I'm setting boundaries because I have to, because I can't live the way I was living anymore. I understand, she said again, and this time I heard something different in her voice. Not just acknowledgement, but acceptance. Maybe even relief. Good. Then take your month. Figure out what you want our relationship to look like. Figure out whether you can love me as I am, not as you wish I were. And then we'll talk. Mom? Yes? I... I'm proud of you. For what you did yesterday. For standing up for yourself. I should have said that first. The words hit me like a physical blow, unexpected and overwhelming. I'd been waiting 37 years to hear those words, and now that they'd finally come, I wasn't sure how to respond. Thank you, I said simply. I love you. I love you too. But love isn't enough anymore. We need more than that. I know. I'll call you in a month. Okay. Okay. The line went dead, and I sat in my kitchen, holding the phone, feeling the weight of what had just happened. I'd just given my daughter a month to decide whether she could love me as I was, and I'd accepted the possibility that she might not be able to. The old Karen would have been terrified by that possibility. The new Karen felt something else entirely. A strange kind of peace, the quiet satisfaction of finally telling the truth about what I needed and what I wouldn't accept. I had a month to figure out who I was going to be now, without the weight of managing Joyce's feelings, without the constant calculation of what I could say or do without causing offense. A month to discover what my life looked like when I wasn't living it in service to someone else's comfort. I poured myself another cup of coffee and wondered what I would do with all that freedom. 3 weeks into my month of silence, I was painting my kitchen walls a soft sage green when the doorbell rang. I'd been expecting Karen. She'd been calling twice a week since graduation, checking on me with the kind of gentle concern that felt like love rather than obligation. But when I opened the door, I found Christine Slaughter standing on my porch, holding a covered dish and wearing an expression of nervous determination. Christine lived 2 houses down and had been my neighbor for 8 years. We'd exchanged pleasantries over the fence, helped each other with packages, but had never been more than cordially friendly. She was a widow, too, about my age, with silver hair she wore in a neat bob and a way of carrying herself that suggested she'd never apologized for taking up space. I hope you don't mind the intrusion, she said, lifting the dish slightly. I made too much lasagna and I wanted to talk to you about what happened at the graduation. I stepped aside to let her in, curious. You heard about that? Honey, everyone in town heard about that. My daughter-in-law's cousin was there. She said it was the most powerful thing she'd ever seen. Christine set the dish on my kitchen counter and looked around, taking in the drop cloths and paint cans. You're redecorating. I am. I gestured to the half-painted wall. I realized I've been living in the same beige for 20 years. It felt like time for a change. Good for you. I did the same thing after my Harold passed. Painted the whole house purple just because I could. She laughed and the sound was warm and genuine. My kids thought I'd lost my mind. Had you? Maybe a little. But it was the good kind of crazy. The kind that happens when you finally stop living for other people and start living for yourself. I poured her a cup of coffee, and we sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd answered Joyce's call 3 weeks ago. But somehow it felt different now. Everything felt different. I wanted to tell you, Christine said, that what you said up there, it resonated with a lot of people. Not just the graduation families, but people like us. People who've spent their whole lives being told they're not quite good enough, not quite worthy of respect. I didn't mean for it to become a big thing, I said, though that wasn't entirely true. Part of me had wanted it to be a big thing, had wanted the world to see what I'd been carrying all these years. Sometimes the most important things happen when we're not trying to make them happen. Christine sipped her coffee thoughtfully. I've been thinking about my own kids, about the ways I've let them make me feel small. Not as dramatically as your situation, but there are patterns, aren't there? Ways we teach people how to treat us. I nodded. I've been thinking about that too. About how I trained Joyce to see me as less than, by accepting less than for so long. My son Charles moved to California 15 years ago. He calls on Christmas and my birthday, sends a card for Mother's Day. Very dutiful. But when I talk to him, I can hear how busy he is, how eager he is to get off the phone. I've been telling myself that's just how adult children are, that I should be grateful for whatever attention I get. But you're not grateful anymore. No, I'm not. I'm 73 years old, and I'm tired of being grateful for scraps. She met my eyes. I called him yesterday, had a real conversation for the first time in years, told him I missed him, that I wanted more than duty calls. Told him I was lonely. How did he respond? He was shocked. Said he had no idea I felt that way. Said he'd been afraid of imposing on me, of being too needy. She laughed, but there was pain in it. 15 years of tiptoeing around each other, both of us afraid of asking for what we wanted. Are you going to see him? He's coming for a visit next month. First time in 5 years. Christine's eyes were bright with tears. I almost didn't make that call. I kept thinking, what if he says no? What if he thinks I'm being dramatic? But then I thought about you, standing up there at that podium, and I realized the only thing worse than him saying no would be never asking at all. I felt a warmth spreading through my chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. I'm glad you called him. I'm glad you gave me the courage to do it. She paused, studying my face. How are you doing with all this? The silence from your daughter must be hard. It is, and it isn't, I said honestly. It's hard because I love her, because I want things to be different between us. But it's also liberating. I'm discovering who I am when I'm not constantly worried about managing her feelings. And who are you? The question caught me off guard. Who was I, when I wasn't defined by my role as Joyce's accommodating mother or Karen's doting grandmother? When I wasn't the woman who cleaned houses or the widow who'd raised her daughter alone? I'm still figuring that out, I admitted. But I'm braver than I thought. And I'm angrier than I thought about things I've been swallowing for years. And I'm lonelier than I thought, but also more content with my own company. That's a good start. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Two women who'd spent decades learning to be small, now trying to figure out how to be themselves. I have a proposition, Christine said eventually. I've been thinking about starting a book club. Not one of those fancy ones where everyone pretends to have read the book and talks about wine pairings. A real book club, where we read books that matter, books that make us think and feel and maybe cry a little. That sounds wonderful. I was hoping you'd say that. I've already talked to a few other women in the neighborhood. Janet Waters, Hazel Delora, Jean Johnson. We're all in similar boats, I think. All trying to figure out who we are now that we don't have to be who everyone else needs us to be. A support group disguised as a book club, I said, smiling. Exactly. What do you think? I thought about it. Really thought about it. For years, my social interactions had been limited to work relationships and family obligations. I'd forgotten what it was like to choose my own company, to form friendships based on mutual interest rather than duty or convenience. I think I'd like that very much. Good. We're meeting next Thursday at Janet's house, 7 o'clock. Our first book is The Awakening by Kate Chopin. Have you read it? A long time ago. In high school, I think. Perfect. It's about a woman who discovers herself later in life, who refuses to live by other people's rules. Seemed appropriate. After Christine left, I stood in my half-painted kitchen, holding the lasagna she'd brought, feeling something I hadn't experienced in years. Anticipation. Not anxiety about what might go wrong, but genuine excitement about what might go right. I called Karen that evening, as had become our routine. How was your day, Grandma? Interesting. I met with a neighbor, and I'm joining a book club. That's wonderful. What kind of book club? The kind where we read books that matter and probably cry a little, I said, repeating Christine's words. Karen laughed. That sounds perfect for you. You always were the one who cried at movies, even the happy ones. Still am. How was your day? How's the job search going? Good, actually. I have a second interview next week with that engineering firm in Portland. They seem really interested. Portland's far from here. I know. But Grandma, after what happened at graduation, I've been thinking about what you said. About living for yourself. About not letting other people's expectations define you. I've been staying close to home partly because I thought Mom needed me here, but also because I was afraid of disappointing her. And now? Now I think maybe the best thing I can do is live my own life, build my own career. Show her that it's possible to love your family without sacrificing your dreams. I felt a surge of pride so intense it took my breath away. That's exactly right. Are you worried about being alone? If I move away, I mean? A little, I admitted. But not as much as I thought I would be. I'm discovering I'm better company than I gave myself credit for. And I'm making new friends. Good. You deserve good friends, Grandma. You deserve everything good. After we hung up, I sat in my living room, surrounded by paint samples and fabric swatches, making plans for the changes I wanted to make to my space. But the changes weren't just about decor. They were about claiming my space, making it truly mine for the first time in decades. 2 days later, I was at the grocery store when I ran into Janet Waters, one of the women Christine had mentioned for the book club. She was a retired teacher, probably in her late 60s, with kind eyes and laugh lines that suggested she'd found plenty to be happy about in life. "You must be Karen," she said, approaching me with a warm smile. "Christine told me all about you. I wanted to say how much I admired what you did at that graduation. My daughter was there. She's a professor at the university, and she said everyone was talking about it." "I hope in a good way," I said, though I realized I didn't really care if it was good or bad. I'd told the truth, and that was enough. Oh, definitely in a good way. My daughter said it was the most authentic moment she'd ever witnessed at a graduation ceremony, that it made her think about her own relationship with me, about whether she really sees me or just sees the role I play in her life. "And does she? See you, I mean?" Janet's smile faltered slightly. "We're working on it. It's complicated, isn't it? The relationships we have with our children. We love them so much. But sometimes that love gets tangled up with expectation and obligation and old hurts. Very complicated. I'm looking forward to Thursday night. Christine said we're going to read The Awakening. I haven't read it since I was teaching, but I remember it being about a woman who chooses herself over everyone else's expectations. That seems to be the theme of my life lately. Good for you. It's about time we all started choosing ourselves. As I drove home, I thought about the woman I'd been 6 months ago, the woman who would have been horrified by the idea of causing a scene, who would have sat quietly in the back row and swallowed her hurt. That woman felt like a stranger now, someone I'd once known but had outgrown. The woman I was becoming was still taking shape, still discovering her own contours and edges, but she was brave enough to paint her kitchen sage green, wise enough to set boundaries with her daughter, and open enough to make new friends who saw her for who she truly was. 3 weeks from now, Joyce would call, and we would have a conversation that would determine the future of our relationship. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of that conversation. I knew who I was now, and I knew what I deserved. Whatever Joyce decided, I would be fine. More than fine. I would be free.